Good afternoon. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation for April 23rd, 2025. My name is Steve Brandt, and I'm president of the board. Before we begin the meeting, I'd like to ask the clerk to remind us of the protocol for speaking so that we can accommodate our captioners.
I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments.
Okay, at this time I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so that we can verify the presence of a quorum.
Board Member Fry is absent. Abene.
Here.
Payne.
Present.
Chugtai.
Present.
Vice President Priestinson.
Present.
President Brandt.
Present.
There are 5 members present.
All right, we have a quorum with us today, and I will now offer an acknowledgement that we meet today on the land of the Dakota. We'll proceed now to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access on the city's Legislative Information Management System, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Board members, the agenda for today's meeting is before us. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. The agenda is adopted. Next is the acceptance of the minutes from our January 22nd meeting. Could I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a proper motion before us. Any discussion?
The date that you just said was off. You said the last meeting was January something or other, but it would have not been in January. Is that right?
Yes, the date would have been March 26th, 2025.
Okay, I was trying to do the math in my head very
That's
quickly. Okay, March 26th, 2025. And we have a motion to accept the minutes in a second.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
nay? Okay, the next item before us is the receiving of public comments related to current board business. Do we have any, anybody signed up? All right, I just want to remind the public that you have the opportunity each meeting to comment on any items that are on that meeting's agenda. That's in addition to the public hearing that we hold each September when we adopt a maximum levy. Right, item number 5 is to receive the city assessor's annual assessment report. Ms. Malmquist, welcome to the committee, to the board.
Good afternoon, President Brandt and members of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Good afternoon. I'm here to present to you the 2025 Annual Assessment Report. This is not Part 2. It is actually a repeat of the assessment report that was presented to Budget Committee earlier last month, I believe it was. I'd like to note that I do have one member of my team, Rob Williamson, with me in case there's any questions that you have that are outside of my span of knowledge that he can assist with. So I'm going to quickly move in. First, a high-level summary and reminders about the assessment. We recently completed the January 2nd, 2025 assessment of approximately 131,000 properties across the city, and this is an annual process, and it is dictated in state statute. Value notices were mailed last month. It's important to remind everyone that the 2025 estimated market values are used to calculate next year's 2026 taxes. We value properties in 1 year, then the budget and levy are set, and the taxes are payable the following year. We know this can be confusing because property tax statements are mailed at approximately the same time as tax statements are mailed at approximately the same time as value notices. The payable 2025 property tax statements that property owners received were calculated using last year's 2024 assessed value. Another important reminder is that the data that we use to set the annual assessment is also dictated by the state. For the January 2nd, 2025 assessment, we analyzed market-based sales transactions that occurred between October 2023 and September of 2024. In Minnesota, property taxes provide a significant portion of the funding for local governments. Property taxes are the Minneapolis General Fund's largest and most flexible source of income and support many of our core governmental functions. Every property's share of taxes is based on its market value, property use, and local government budgets, which become a tax rate. You can see the image at the bottom of the screen for a simplified illustration. So market value is the price a property would sell for on the open market. And the assessor's role is to reflect the real estate market and set fair and accurate market values by following market trends. The assessor also classifies property according to its use. Different uses of property, even if they have the same value, pay different taxes because of the class rates set by the state legislature. We will provide an example of that for you in a moment. And then the tax rate is determined using the budgets of local governments such as city, county, school districts, and watersheds. The intermediary step in converting values to taxes is called the tax capacity. This slide illustrates how this works for some common types of properties in the city. The calculation for tax capacity is the market value, which is in the second column, multiplied by the class rate, which is in the third column. As you can see here, a residential property, which is on the first line, and a commercial property on the bottom line, if they are both assessed at $300,000, they will pay different taxes, and that is because the class rate for a residential property is 1% and the class rate for a commercial property is 2%. As a result, residential property will pay approximately half the property taxes of a commercial property. I must note, though, that this is a very simplistic model illustrating tax calculation. It excludes complex factors like special programs like homesteading, state general tax, and fiscal disparities. This slide is a historical view of the city's total estimated market value. The overall estimated market value for this city decreased by just under 1% to $64.8 billion this year. This does not, though, include utilities and railroads, which are assessed by the state because those values don't become available until the summer. This does include new construction added for permitted work, totaling approximately $700 million this year. This slide is a visualization of the breakdown of the three major property type categories by their 2025 total market value on the left, and then their tax capacity is the bar on the right. Because of the calculation of value to tax discussed on the previous slide, there is a change in the distribution between the three categories when we move from market value on the left to tax capacity on the right. So you can see here that residential values in green comprise over 62% of the total city market value. However, when the class rates are applied, the residential portion of tax capacity is just over 53%. You can also see that the commercial value in blue comprises just over 16% of the total market value of the city, however, comprises almost 27% of the tax capacity after the rates have been applied. This is a historical view of the tax capacity as a percentage of the total tax capacity by property type. So if we compare 2024 to 2025, the two bars on your furthest right, you can see the year-to-year shift between commercial, apartment, and residential properties, and it's just over 1% from commercial to residential, with apartment remaining constant. However, this means that residential properties will bear a greater burden of the taxes payable in 2025 than they did in 2024. This slide illustrates the change in total market value by ward. Each ward is represented by a bar, and then the percent of increase or decrease is labeled at the end of each bar. So you will see here that Ward 7 saw a decrease of just over 8%, and three other wards saw decreases while the rest saw increases. And this is total EMV of all property types, not just residential. This is a historical look at the total residential value changes. This year, the overall residential market value increased by 2.6%. Last year marked the first time in many years that we've seen a decrease in overall residential value, and we have seen a small rebound since then. While the previous slide illustrates an overall value increase for residential properties, this slide further breaks down the data into the three major property types of residential properties: condominium townhome, duplex triplex, and then the single family category. Overall, there were increases in each of these three submarkets, and there was about $118 million added in new construction. On to compliance. Our assessment is closely scrutinized by the state to ensure accuracy and equity. We follow requirements mandated by the state, which are based on the International Association of Assessing Officers standards on sales ratios and standards on mass appraisal. This data reflects the residential market. The analysis is of properties that have sold so that we can compare our assessed values to what they are selling for to analyze how accurate and equitable the values are in comparison to sale prices. The first measurement I will review is the sales ratio, which is the third column. This is a measure of the level of the assessment. It is a comparison of the market value to the sale price of properties. Simply stated, it's the sale price divided by the market value. And we use the median ratio as a measure of central tendency in our work. So looking at the bottom row of the 3,645 sales, we had a median ratio of 95.4%. And an acceptable median is between 90 to 105. However, to be consistent with surrounding jurisdictions, we all typically look to for a median of around 95%. We don't want to be at a significantly different assessment level than other jurisdictions because that can present some tax inequities. Moving on then to the second measure is the coefficient of dispersion, or the COD. It measures the uniformity of our assessment. It essentially measures how far away all of the ratios or the sales are from that 95.4%. An acceptable range for residential properties is less than 15, and we definitely meet this requirement. And last, the last measure we're going to look at is the price-related differential, the PRD. It is critically important to our work because it measures the vertical equity of our assessment. So when low-valued properties are valued at a greater percentage of market value than high-valued properties, our assessment would be considered regressive. But when low-valued properties are valued at a lower percentage than high-valued properties, the assessment would be considered progressive. But for tax purposes, we don't want an assessment to be either regressive or progressive, and so we make sure that that PRD is within an acceptable range, and it is. This is a historical look at the required statistical measurements that our assessment is judged on for accuracy and equity. It's important to point out that we have seen a drastic decrease in sales volume since the peak in 2022. The 3,645 sales is actually a decrease of 45%, which means we have a little bit less data to rely on when we're set the assessment. It was not the strong sellers market that we have seen in the past. This illustrates the comparison of the median sale price in blue to the median market value in orange. These lines should be close together and going in the same direction. And you can see here that this measure is within standards and is acceptable as well. Our median market value did increase by 3.2%. When we break down the changes for residential properties as far as how much by percentage their property type, their values are going to increase or decrease, if you look at the orange bar, nearly 45% of the properties, residential properties in the city, are going to see an increase from 0 to 5%. This is a map of our single-family properties with the coding to indicate how much change there was for each. It's just a visual demonstration of the data that we looked at previously. This is a ward comparison of the residential values and the same statistical measures that we discussed earlier. The columns to the left are the 2024 and 2025 total market values, the amount of new construction, and the net change in the total value. Moving across the chart is also the median market value, number of sales, median sale price, as well as the COD. What I want to mention here is the range of sales ratios on the far second to the far right column is that we range from 95 to 95.9. That indicates the level of assessment across the city is quite consistent from ward to ward. Pivoting to the commercial market, if we separate the commercial from the industrial, you can see an overall decrease of 3.5% in the commercial market. 8.6% in the commercial market, sorry, and then 2.1% increase for the industrial market with an overall decrease of 5.5%. This is a historical look at the commercial industrial market values. You can see here the decrease that we saw down to $11.5 billion, putting us more in line with where values were in 2019. To tell a more complete story, though, we have broken down the markets into geographical submarkets, and this slide separates out downtown on the far left from uptown, the next bar over, the commercial market outside of downtown and uptown, and then the industrial market overall. So you can see here we are still seeing overall decreases in the downtown market and a slight decrease in the uptown commercial market. Reviewing the statistics, we are within the acceptable ranges for all of these measurements. And we're going to go to the apartment market. Apartments saw a net decrease of 3.4%, but there was still $479 million added in new construction. And our statistics are well within the acceptable range here. Moving on to notices. Notices were mailed March 14th, so they have been in the mailboxes for quite some time. They are highlighted in gold this year, and so tax statements for next year that align with this year's value will be color-coded in gold. Anything else I wanted to share with you here? I don't believe so. These are some of the tools that we make available to property owners and city leadership. People can look up sales within their neighborhoods. They can look at what's happening overall within trends in our market values, and then we create the levy impact estimator in a partnership with finance. And so we will be working on that for both the mayor's use, legislative use, and Board of Estimate and Taxation's use as well this year. Just some dates. Value notices were out. The local board convened and adjourned last week. And so all the properties that qualified for the local board also qualified to go to the Hennepin County Board of Appeal, and that'll take place in June. Our staff will continue to work on those appeals as they need to be heard. And President Brandt, with that concludes my presentation for you this evening.
From my colleagues. Commissioner Payne.
Thank you, President Brandt. I just spoke with a constituent earlier this week, and they recently moved to the city, and I think they've only had about 3 assessments since they've lived in my ward, and they said each time they felt it was overvalued, they appealed, and they won that appeal and got their assessment lowered. And I was curious if this is just anecdotal, or, as we're looking at the PRD, if there's any other, maybe ward-specific, geographic-specific elements that might be happening. They happen to live in the Stinson Triangle, which I feel is like a little bit of a unique corner of my ward, but I'm curious if there's any insights there or if it's just purely anecdotal.
President Brandt and Member Payne, very good question. We anecdotally hear the same thing. So what happens when people call and talk to us about their market value? It's the first step in the appeals process. What we encourage on the backside of their value notice is the appraiser that's specifically responsible for their property, so they have a one-to-one contact with somebody in our office that they can talk to specifically about the property that they own. And so the property will be reviewed by our appraiser. They'll go out, inspect it as they need to. They'll do their market analysis, and if they determine that it should be decreased, if our model is not working for that property, they have the opportunity to make that adjustment, and that's why we have the review period and the appeals period. What we don't report on a lot is about the appeals that are addressed by staff in the beginning versus the appeals that have to make it all the way through the appeals process. Most of the cases are resolved at the staff level, but I will tell you that our residential model that's built for the 90,000 parcels, residential parcels in the city, it can't be correct for all of them. There are obviously going to be pockets within the city that are going to be unique, properties that have unique identifiers, such as being historical or things like that, where our model can't nail every property correctly at 100% every time. So it is true that we may have properties that we have maybe seen some issues in their valuation, and they bring it to our attention, we make the correction, and then what we try to do is then implement that into our model going forward so that it can be adjusted and taken care of in the future.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Benny?
Thank you, President Brandt. I think one or two slides back, you mentioned there was some kind of a tool there that was useful for the public, or is this useful internally? And could you describe what that is, but also how does your office work then with the finance department to make sure that your metrics, because obviously you don't just take what you get from the prior, what was approved, and then run your calculations. You must be also working with the finance office to say, we'd have a problem here with this, measurement or metric. So,
President Brandt and Member, as far as working with finance, we work with finance in advance to address concerns that we're seeing in the market. For example, last year we knew that we were going to start seeing some shifts and some decreases, so we prepare finance for that so they can start to think about that when they're doing their budget work as well. So yes, we do have a close partnership between either Dushani or her staff as we talk about what we're looking at for the future or looking at for the current assessment. And then the tools, we have property info located on our website where people can put in their property address or property ID number and pull up all the information that we have about their property. We store all the property data here at the City of Minneapolis, but also in property info, it pulls in information from rental licensing and CPED, and so it's really a one-stop shop for people to be able to find out everything about their property that the city does. When they want to get to the tax side, they have to go to the county because the county sends tax statements and collects the taxes. On the top right-hand side of this chart, it is more of an internal-facing tool that we use in the summer months, but we do make it externally focused, the levy estimator, so that property owners could go in and see if the levy is adjusted by this much, well, how will it affect property taxes across the city. On the bottom left is a tool that we developed to help residents find comparable sales, because when they come to our appraisers, if they come to the board really prepared with comparable sales and information about the market, it really helps the appraiser or the board make a decision more efficiently and effectively. And the bottom right-hand side is just more overall data that bottom right-hand side, I think is what I said, where we provide more high-level information about each neighborhood within the city. Thank you.
Are there other questions? Okay. I would like to start with just an observation. We all know this is happening, but the numbers lay it out, and that is we've gone from a third of our tax capacity being borne by commercial industrial property to just over a quarter, and that's why the homeowners out there are feeling the pain they're feeling despite modest increases in their home values. This is this is the first, if you look back over 5 years, this is the first time I can remember apartment, commercial, industrial, and home new construction being at this point. I keep track by year, and these are by far lower than in previous years for new construction. Do you attribute that primarily to stubborn interest rates? I know that last year was one of the factors.
President Brandt, that is one of the factors definitely that is going into it, but there are plenty of other factors that go into why development is occurring or not occurring across the city, as you know.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then this is the first year in the years I've been keeping track that commercial outside of downtown and uptown has gone down. It's very marginal, but do you have a sense of what's happening there? Are those having a drag effect on the rest of the city, those submarkets?
President Brandt, the CBD does operate sometimes like its own entity. Yeah. However, it does, there are carryover effects to the surrounding neighborhoods. Okay. So we are not surprised to see that some of those numbers took a small decrease as well.
Okay. I noticed that the Fourth Ward had one of the larger increases in residential new construction, and I haven't probably kept up as much on a localized level, but is there a new development there of some kind that is stimulating that? Or?
No, President Brandt, we are still seeing increases in the areas of the city that are still appreciating in value. So okay. It's when property values saw decreases back due to either the recession or the housing crisis, that we haven't come all the way back from those numbers. And so where there's still affordable, we're still seeing increases in those values, for sure.
Okay. Commissioner Benny has a question.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just a question just occurred to me that I don't think we've asked here since I've been sitting up here when we have your presentation, which is very interesting, by the way. Are you seeing similar problems with the commercial, industrial property valuations in some of the communities that surround Minneapolis that aren't bedroom communities? I'm thinking of maybe Bloomington, Plymouth might have some cities that have a fairly robust commercial industrial base. Are they also seeing similar declines?
President Brandt and member, the suburban markets and the downtown markets do not move at the same pace in the same direction all the time. And it's not unusual for us to be moving in one direction and the suburbs to be moving in another, or at a slower pace, for example. I believe, if my memory serves, though, that the suburbs with the larger commercial base also saw some decreases. I'd have to verify that for you.
Yeah, at some point, and maybe I need to request that maybe when we have a person that supports the BET, but I'd really like to understand comparables. I feel that's my impression that we have a fairly small industrial base in Minneapolis and ultimately a pretty small commercial base in some ways. Obviously, there's downtown, but considering the rest of the city, it would be good for me to understand some of those things and how we stack up against similarly sized cities around the country, because I think this is a pretty residential city in many ways, and I think this is the natural, this is the natural course of events when you start to lose your commercial base. And then also just the way in which some of the commercial base is distributed through the city. We've got our core downtown. You guys have been tracking uptown for a while, but there are other parts of the city that I think have emerged more robustly, maybe in Northeast. I'm not totally sure. But it would be good to maybe sort of have more visual on some places where the city might be growing commercially and not just declining. Sort of rambling, but there you go.
President Brandt and members, we are able to do more analysis if you did wish for us to look at our commercial industrial tax base as compared to the suburban cities. happy to do that. We do look at it. It's just not something I present to you. I kind of focus on Minneapolis here, but also would be happy to have another conversation about more specifics about the commercial or the industrial market within the city itself as well.
Yeah, it would give some insight to whether or not people are choosing Minneapolis or choosing another location in Hennepin County or near Minneapolis, I think, for business investment and so on. Thanks.
Commissioner Chutai.
Thank you, Mr. President. Really appreciate this presentation. I recall when you presented to the Budget Committee, I believe you were asked a question potentially by Councilmember Rainville just around, what does the future look like, and when can you estimate when we'll see a rebound in that commercial industrial sector, which of course is an impossible question for anyone to answer really, but I remember at that time you told us a little bit of, you shared some insight from a conference you had attended recently with professionals in your industry, and I wonder if you might recall and be able to share that with the board as well.
Yes, President and members, I did mention something that I had seen in a presentation, and it was a presentation about metro cities across the United States and where they are each independently at in the market cycle and how they relate to each other. And so the presentation that I saw earlier this year, so it would have been January, February, I believe, was that Minneapolis was like at the point where we're starting to build again. And so that's where this specific person that's a local expert, I would say, that was his analysis, is that based on the market indicators they were looking at, that's where Minneapolis is at in the cycle. Thank you.
Commissioner Priest-Stinson.
I am curious, and speaking about data and things that we might want to look at, the percentage of our residential that is non-homestead, because as we know that when taxes go up, the price of rent goes up for renters, and so I'm curious. I would like to start humanizing our renters, to start looking at how much of those taxes actually do come from renters. I'd be curious about that information. I think it's important and relevant to this board as we start thinking about what the maximum tax levy is. Those are some of the types of things that we should be thinking about because that is also the impact. And then I was just going to say on the industrial front of things, well, nobody can predict it. I would say that there has been a lot of momentum, but more so recently about like who this city is and what they want. And so the 4th Ward and part of the 5th, North Minneapolis, has long suffered historical harm from industrial and some commercial businesses. And so I would be, for example, Northern Metals, we know that fight that went on for a long time, and folks from community are actually actively working out to purchase that. So I think there's some changes like that that are happening where our community members, the activist community, if you will, are making some gains in that area. And so it'll be interesting to see what those types of things convert to and what the impact is on that. We can't say yet, but as those conversions start to happen into different types of spaces, I'm curious what they get classified as and the impact that that will have. So just some future. Thank you.
Right. Seeing no further, one more question.
I'm sorry. Thank you,
That's all right.
President Brandt. Just to clarify, though, that I believe the industrial category doesn't just mean heavy industry or dirty industry. It also means light industrial. And, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Malmquist.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much for the
presentation.
opportunity.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll move on to the next item. The clerk will receive and file our previous report. Item 6 on the agenda is a discussion of the City Comptroller's report and presentation on quarter 4 of 2024, and that will be led by George Hargrove from the Comptroller's office. Welcome.
Thanks, President Brandt. Okay, thanks again, President Brandt, and the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Good to see you all today. Thanks for inviting me in to give the presentation on the city's fourth quarter and final report for 2024. To start off with, just a couple of pointers about the report here. The information is unaudited. We have our audit ongoing right now by the Office of the State Auditor. It is a point in time as of December 31st. We have most of the I think almost all of their what we call period 12 transactions in our system, but we don't have any final audit adjustments or anything. But most of the operational data that I present today should be final. As I said, too, just a little disclaimer at the end, too, just really recommend that that we consult with, if we could, with the departments and everything, if the report's going to be used for transfers or things like that, or spending decisions. Moving on. In terms of the highlights for 2024, we have I think one of the most important things that happened this last year was that all three major credit agencies gave us a AAA bond rating. That includes Moody's back in September or so of last year. So that's something that hasn't happened in quite some time, which I think reflects well on the city of Minneapolis. Another highlight is our parking area. The revenues have rebounded from the depths of the pandemic. They were up about $5.3 million from 2023. Property taxes were under budget by about $23 million or so for 2024 due to a higher uncollectible amount. However, conversely, for our local sales taxes, that we use to fund the downtown assets and the Target Center and the Convention Center, they've been up. They were up about almost $10 million from 2023. And then our ARPA spending, which the American Rescue Plan Act, we closed that out in November of 2024. So you'll see that in our results, where some of the grant spending and the cash balances have gone down as we transferred that to our general fund at the end of last year. Moving on, we have, in terms of our investment portfolio, we have a value of about $1.234 million or so as of December 31st, 2024. A slight decrease from last year, or December 31st, 2023 at this time. This is the cash that backs up our cash balances in all of our funds. In addition to that, the city is meeting its fund balance or net positions for almost all of our funds. There's just a few that I wanted to mention that are a little bit below our target amounts. The first one is self-insurance. That's about $48 million or so in terms of our net position, below the break-even point that we like to see. A lot of that is due to liabilities that have increased. However, the cash balance has gone up quite a bit. It's up about to $175 million now. So about $10 million more from the last quarters. So it's kind of we are looking at the liabilities now and expect to make final adjustments for 2024 shortly. Another fund that I'd mentioned is the Fleet Services Equipment Fund. This is above the target right now, but our projections show it may go below it at some point in time, so it's one we're watching and working with Fleet Services on. In terms of the parking fund, that is below the cash balance, the target that we have in our financial policies. However, it has gone up by about $2 million since 2023, but still has a ways to go to meet target. But based on the latest projections, we should reach that at some point, possibly this year or next year, at some point if our projections pan out. as our parking revenue has rebounded, especially the off-street parking ramps. And then finally, property services, about $900,000 below their cash reserve target of $3.9 million. Moving on to our biggest fund, this is our general fund. This keeps track of all of our resources except ones that are required to be in its own fund, and those are generally internal service or enterprise or special revenue funds that have restrictions on it. You can see our cash has gone up a little bit from the end of 2023 by about $3-4 million or so. I think the next bullet point here is kind of one that I think kind of really tells the picture, or the summary kind of how the city is doing. You can see our fund balance at the end of 2023 was about $210 million, and now it's about $209 million. So it's basically we've maintained the status quo. It's been very stable for the last year. We haven't gotten a lot. We haven't had a lot of increases or decreases. So again, it reflects the stability of the last year. It does exceed our 17% of the next year's budget. So that comes to about $112.7 million. So we're about $96 million above our fund balance target. But it does have to potentially absorb a planned use of fund balance of about $25 million in 2025. We also received approval from the city council last week to roll over about a little less than $42 million. So again, that will come out of the fund balance, both those things. And then we also have about another $15 million or so of public safety aid, which is restricted. So that's also in there. So roughly, we have about 21% of our proposed 2025 budget. And if you factor in all the restrictions and the money we have to save, to meet the use of the fund balance and the rollovers, we got about $27 million left before we would reach the target amount or the minimum amount. And I can illustrate that a little bit more on this slide here. You can see we start with our $209 million in fund balance that we had at the end of 2024. And then we have our planned use of fund balance, both for public safety aid and non-public safety aid. So that's about $24 million or so. And then we have rollovers as well, about $10 million in public safety aid and about $32 million in non-public safety aid. And then in addition, what's not in the budget is the North Commons Park, but that is being reserved. That was formerly ARPA funds. So you can see if you do the math, we have about $140 million or so unrestricted, and we need to have at least 113 or so to meet our fund balance target. So that's the $27 million. Lots of unknowns, I think, as we've all followed the news lately. Federal funds are certainly an issue that we've all spent some time on. We may use more of the fund balance, possibly in our next year's budget in '26. There's the self-insurance that's still below target. We also there's been quite a bit of market economic swings lately. We do worry about the potential of tariffs increasing costs or other inflationary things too that may result in our budget not going quite as far. So just looking at a little bit of our spending in a little bit more detail on revenues, you can see we finished about $40 million under budget in our revenues. Most of that was in property tax, as well as the state aid. The state aid really isn't a big concern because that was money that we thought we were originally budgeted to get in '24, but we actually got it in December of '23, right before the year started. So that's why that was under. Otherwise, most of the rest of the categories, service charges, franchise fees, licenses, other revenue, are very close to budget for the year. And then in terms of the rate of our spending, like I said, we finished under budget by about $40 million. You can see that, that wasn't something that just occurred in one quarter. We were a little short each quarter, and it grew just a little bit each quarter, I should say. And so we got about 94% of the budget. Normally, we would have about 102% of the budget. And in terms of our expenditures, this one kind of categorizes our spending among the various areas of the city. You can see we finished about $80 million to the good. That helped us maintain the stability and provide funding for this year's budget. You can see most of our spending, of course, is in public safety. You can see most of the underspending was in the CPED, our development area, as well as internal services. And the main reason why internal services was under budget and spending is because we had money for public safety aid in North Commons Park budgeted there as a holding area for the whole city until the council reappropriated that into other areas. And we're still holding some of that going into '25. And then in terms of the rate of our expenditures, you can see we were under budget by about 10-11%. We spent about 89% of our budget. You can see, just like revenue, it kind of occurred fairly evenly, especially after the first quarter on. And so we'll be watching that as we move into the second quarter here in 2025. Normally, we would have spent about 94% of our budget. Moving on to other funds that are outside of the general fund. These are special revenue funds. Again, these funds they have restrictions on them, so we're required by the accounting rules to keep them in their own area in our accounting system. Generally, that's the convention center, Target Center, some things in regulatory services, and of course grants, and CPID has quite a bit of special revenue as well too. So for that area, you can see they decreased the fund balance by about $33 million. The cash balance decreased by about $95 million compared to 2023. That was expected again because the city made a major push to spend the ARPA funds that we originally got in 2021-22, and that was about $271 million. So it was certainly a major effort by the city to spend that down, and that was whatever was left was transferred back to the general fund in November of last year. So again, these are special revenues. Again, we expect these to be fairly stable, although some of them are certainly subject to the economy, especially ones that involve sales taxes. And then just to take a little quick look here at some of the numbers here, you can see the convention center was down a little bit on their cash and fund balance. Other areas, you can see the downtown assets fund, though, conversely, it's gone up as the sales tax collection has improved. The grant funds, of course, have gone down quite a bit. You can see that near the bottom of the slide here. And so overall, like I say, we have about, it has dropped, from 2023. Then we move on to the next part of the family of funds here, and this is our internal service funds. They're these funds, departments that normally provide services within the city. So that includes things like our equipment or fleet services, property services, which provides our facilities and buildings, our stores that provide, parts that are needed, highly used parts that are needed on hand, our self-insurance fund, of course, that covers our medical, dental, liability, other workers' comp, things like that. You can see in general they have increased a little bit. Our net position is up about $4 million from 2023. Our cash is up about $25 million or so. So again, they're generally, the cash balances are reserved for certainly emergencies that come in, as well as investments in projects and the like that they need to invest in to provide support to the city. And just take a little look at our chart here that has all the internal service funds. You can see our fleet is going down. I mentioned that earlier, both in terms of cash and net position. In addition, our self-insurance has kind of gone the other way, where our cash is going up and our net position is getting better too. And so we'll have, when we issue the 2024 financials, we'll have a better idea of the liabilities there. And certainly when I come back in a few months, hopefully on the second quarter, we'll take another look at those liabilities. But again, modest increases in both cash and net position. And then finally, our last funds are our enterprise funds. These run like regular commercial businesses. They provide services to our external customers outside of the city government. Generally, they're public works areas such as our sewer, stormwater, water utilities, solid waste, parking, which also includes our impound lot. And then also CPED has a relatively small enterprise fund as well, too. So the net position there increased by about 16, 17 million from 2023. The cash decreased by about $8 million. Again, these are fairly stable. Generally, they provide services that are needed and are pretty resistant to decreases in demand and the like. And then lastly, just to take a little look at some of the numbers themselves, we can see various small changes. Sewer's up a little bit. Stormwater is down on their cash and fund balance. Otherwise, you can see the parking has gotten better. That's what, call your attention to the middle part of the screen there that shows, like, say, the cash going up, by a couple $1 billion for parking, as well as the net position as well, too. So anyway, fairly stable there. Slight decreases in cash overall, but increases in our fund balance. So that concludes my presentation today. Please let me know if I could answer any questions. Thank you.
All right. Are there any questions for Mr. Hardgrove? Okay. I wanted to delve into one or two areas. First one has to do with, we're looking at a painful increase in the property levy under the 5-year financial direction for 2026, and it'll be more painful because of the shift in property value burden. I noted a couple areas in here where it seems like there might be a potential bonus to offset that, and I wanted to see if these are available or if they are already spoken for. For example, I believe this is the last year we'll be making the $6.7 million payment on the debt service for the convention center. Does that then become a source of potential cash that can be applied to other areas of the budget, such as reducing the increase in the property tax?
Well, President Brandt, let me if I could get back to you on that. I do want to talk to Ellen Hoppy, our investment director, as well as Jane DeSenzik, our budget director. I'm not up on the day-to-day budget or what's occurring on there, so if I can get back to you, I'd appreciate it.
My sense is that debt service was funded out of the salt taxes through the Downtown Assets Fund, so salt taxes are running $6.5 million over budget for 2024. So I'm hoping there is some cushion available there. There's also quite an increase in the Downtown Assets Fund balance for the self-insurance area. And I wondered if it's possible for you to forward to us the tort liability actuarial valuation that was done in 2023. Perhaps the council members have seen it, but I've seen it cited, but not the actual document. And unless there's been some update to it, in that case, maybe the update would be appropriate.
President Brandt, yes, no, I can send that to you. I do have the one for 23 that it just breaks down our liabilities.
Sure.
I thought I sent it. I can't remember if it was the city council or yourselves, them, but we are updating it too. So I don't know if you want to, we certainly will have it updated. I would say by the end of May. That's our goal for getting the financials ready for final review by our auditors. So I could do either one, though. I can certainly resend you.
What you have now, and then if you would, and then I will look forward to an update when that's ready.
Okay.
Any further questions? Okay, we thank you for your presentation, which the clerk will receive and file, please. We next have announcements or updates on our agenda, and excuse me, we do have the bond transmittal. Thank you. Item 7 is a bond transmittal memo, which requests the board to issue tax-exempt general obligation bonds at a future meeting for projects of necessity for the city. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments? I'm not sure we have anybody here to take them, but we could always follow up. I think this is a fairly routine item, so clerk will receive and file that report. Thank you, Commissioner Benny. And now we move on to announcements. And the only announcement I have is an update on the hiring process. Both of the finalists have gone through 2 rounds of interviews, and there was consensus among the search committee members for one of the candidates, and so the HR people are doing a background check, and I hope that at our next meeting we'll have a name to bring forward to you. Right? So, and then we should probably renew our discussion of what we want that person to do. We've completed any other updates I should ask? Okay. We've completed all the business to come before us, and without objection, we stand adjourned.